Hello survivors and welcome to another Walking Dead Road to Survival video. In this video we're going to be going over some war details as there is going to be an update coming called War Reforged, which is going to actually be used for the rest of the current war qualifiers as well as upcoming seasons as well. Let's get into the info. So first up, there is a beta. It will be 35.0. If you want to participate in this, you can obviously find it on the blog post if you want to sign up. But do be aware you have to be part of Android to do this, and it does force you to use the Google update. So if you are someone who uses Amazon, you will have to actually have a fresh install for Google, and you won't be able to switch back to Amazon until the beta is actually over. This is obviously always the downside. Now, going into the full details now, War Reforged. The War Reforged update will bring a few changes to War with the intent of updating the experience to make it fresh while also enhancing and protecting the competitive integrity of the event. Check out all the details below. The first major update is going to be the multiple war defense teams. The biggest change coming in War Reforged is the use of multiple defense teams in war. Each war event can now be configured to 2, 3, or 4 defense teams per camp. Attacking players will be able to choose from which war defense team they wish to attack. Defense teams will not allow duplicate fighters across them, so each fighter can only be used one time across the entirety of your defenses. Additionally, camp defense teams cannot be assigned to strongholds, so make sure you strategize appropriately. With that said, all fighters, regardless of their assigned defense team, will still be available for use on your attack teams. So potentially up to 5 defense teams will be needed. Your 4 main defense teams on your camp, and then the 1 in the tower. This is a lot of characters. This is 25. And already looking around, I can see this is the main gripe for a lot of people in terms of the amount of characters that you're actually going to need. If we go into the details of the remainder of War Season 4, we can see that with the War Reforged update, the second half of the War Season will require players to assign 3 war defense teams composed of different fighters for the CRW qualifiers on the schedule. So it isn't going to go up to the 4 in the current qualifiers. However, War of Champions weekend, even in Season 4, will require 4 defense teams for the entire event, and that includes wars outside of the War of Champions. So when War of Champions is going on, there's generally a war for everyone else. Everyone will be required to have 4 defense teams at that point. So obviously this is a huge change, the amount of characters that you're potentially going to have to build up. You could potentially go back on characters you have built up already. There are definitely a lot of characters in the game. Majority of them are defensive, so having defense teams isn't going to be a problem. But the issue is going to be, what in a lot of people's minds, the effectiveness of these defense teams. Now, for free-to-play and newer players, this is going to be a bit tougher, obviously. But I would say you want to just start picking up defense team characters in that Mythic store as soon as possible. Right now, I believe there are 3 defense leaders in there: Wangfa, Ezekiel, and Pam. If you haven't got all of these guys to LB3, you might want to look at maybe picking those characters up so you can actually build teams behind them. We'll move on to further information, and it says locked war defenses. One of the key aspects of war is to be able to strategize against your opponents, building attack teams to take on your opponent's best constructed defense teams. Historically, players have been able to change up their defense teams as the battle evolves to develop new strategies. However, other players have used this system to exploit the outcome of war events by dropping their defense teams entirely to feed points to other factions. We believe this is against the competitive spirit of the game. With this in mind, we will be changing the way that war defense teams function with the release of War Reforged update. Defense teams must now be assigned, including all weapons and mods, prior to the start of matchmaking, and will be locked in until the completion of that war siege. You'll be able to assign these teams via the teams menu once you have completed the new war tutorial. Your faction leaders will be able to see how many defense teams you have assigned prior to matchmaking to ensure that your faction won't be at a disadvantage. Make sure you have your best teams assigned. So just like we can currently select the one war defense team that we want, we potentially are going to be able to select the multiple by just selecting war team again, and it will just be like war team 1, war team 2, war team 3, and eventually war team 4. There's some info on the scouting phase. Another big change coming to War is the adjustment of the scouting phase. Players no longer have to spend raid energy to see what a player has on their war defense. Instead, all player defenses will be visible to the opponent for a set period of time before the war begins, but combat with them prior to the actual war beginning will no longer be possible. Some information will not be visible on your opponent's defenses team's camp, such as weapons and mods. However, that information will be visible during combat. So obviously another massive change in terms of what teams you're going to actually want to take on. When in the scouting phase now, it does seem like it's worth to actually check out what teams the opponent actually has. So if you're one of the biggest hitters in your faction, you can at least assign yourself effectively to the hardest team in each set. And that will probably be the way a lot of factions will do it. And then if you're one of the people who don't hit as hard, you'll be going for the opponent's weaker teams effectively, at least initially, because there will definitely be a bit of a gap between the 4 teams or 3 teams in someone's roster for sure. These will obviously improve over time, but initially at least this is going to be the case. Next up we have lives and bonus points. Additionally, another change to War comes in the form of an adjustment to player camp HP. Camp's HP will no longer be a single percentage bar, but will now be broken into lives. Each camp's lives will be distributed equally amongst all defense teams, and the total number of lives may change from one war event to the next. For example, one war event may require the use of 3 defense teams with 3 lives per defense team, totaling 9 lives total per camp. Next, at the end of an individual war siege, bonus points will be tallied based on the number of surviving defense teams. Coming out with multiple defense teams alive will grant significantly more points than having only a single defense team survive the siege. So do your best to keep them alive. Now there's actually quite a lot to break down here. I'd say this is honestly one of the biggest game changes. Having multiple defenses isn't that big a game change. It's just expecting you to have more teams, which is not as big a deal as this, in my opinion, when it comes to how much this is going to actually change how war works. Currently, when you attack a camp, you can potentially partially defend people. So your defense could effectively take out 4 of the enemy team, but the enemy team would still win, and you'd lose a very small amount of HP in that case. I think with the live system, when that happens, you're still going to lose your 1 life. So it's almost like you haven't done any sort of partial defense. The only thing that will probably change there is the same sort of a thing that happens right now, is the attack team will have reduced points, but the defense team will actually have increased loss, because they're going to now increase the loss to a full life lost. This is going to be interesting to see how this actually plays out. Obviously, testing is the most important part of this, but if there's no partial defenses, it's just defend or not defend, it's going to be obviously quite different to what we're used to right now. The last part is actually interesting. I think this has been something that a lot of people have been talking about for a very long time when it comes to potentially being, getting benefits for defending, not just in war, but in raids as well. This isn't going to obviously count for raids, but you never know. This is the first step maybe. Maybe we'll get some bonuses for actually hitting those defends in raids, but in war, it's hard to know if this is going to count towards your actual milestones or if this is going to count to your faction points. We'll have to wait and see. If it counts towards your milestones, it will mean that people who build good defense teams or more good defense teams will actually be able to score more points. So this is going to be more beneficial for people who are in those situations. It will also mean that anyone who coins their camp to repair right at the end of the battle potentially could get more points out of that. So potentially you could kind of see that as more of like a pay to win situation where you're actually coining to just straight up get bonus points based on the fact that your camp's alive. It really depends on the situation when it comes to repairs in the future, whether, coins are going to be a big thing, how quickly these repairs can come in. There have been some changes in the past to that, and we'll see if there are any changes in this. But this part of the update is going to have the biggest gameplay impact overall. The other parts are just more the initial shock and awe of the fact that you're going to have up to 25 defense team characters now. There is going to be some adjustments to mercenaries. Mercenary teams have been adjusted with War Reforged to have the appropriate number of defense teams and lives based on the configuration of the event. This is obviously very important. If a mercenary team only had like 3 lives, you'd actually be denying the enemy team points based on that. Whereas now, that's not going to be the case. There was a kind of cheesy thing you could do with mercenaries, and that's not going to be the case anymore based on the fact that it is lives rather than HP. So that is the only bonus, in my opinion, when it comes to the lives. It's going to be there's no longer going to be any mercenary cheese when it comes to how you hit mercenaries. Now, there is some War Reforged player feedback. If you do have any feedback about this system, whether it be right now or once it actually launches, I would say definitely test it out if you are on the fence, or even if you're like kind of negative towards it. Myself, I think some of these changes are going to be very drastic, so I want to test this out to see how much of an impact it's going to have. And once I do test it out, I'll probably make a different video just basically giving my experience how it's going to be. Now, if you are part of the beta, this is the details on what's going to be happening there in the testing. There is a stash to get your hands on some characters if you don't have too many. There are going to be 3 Blitz Wars on the 6th, 7th, 8th, and they're going to last about 24 hours each. This is the details for these Blitz Wars. You can see Blitz War number 1 is a CRW, 2 war defense teams, 3 lives per team, so a total of 6 hits to take out all of your defense teams, and it will be 6v6. The next one is another Blitz War, CRW again, 3 war defense teams, 2 lives per team, again 6 hits, but this time it's going to be 8 versus 8. This actually kind of, in my mind, seems wrong, but it's an 8 versus 8. And then lastly, it's a Blitz War that's just an AOW, so it will just be the region rather than the entire of the beta. This time it's going to be 4 war defenses with 2 lives each, and it's going to be 6 versus 6. So the issue is here, I think in my mind, they've got the 6 versus 6 and 8 versus 8 in Blitz War 2 and 3 the wrong way around. But I could be wrong here. It just seems to be like there's too many people in 8 versus 8 for 6 lives per camp. People are going to be able to, not going to be able to attack certain camps. It's going to be like a fight with your faction, not a good situation. And then the last one, there's too many lives per camp, so you're not even going to be taking out people. I mean, that one's not a terrible scenario, but Blitz War 2 looks like it potentially is. And then you can see the strongholds for the Blitz Wars. It's going to be 5 strongholds per Blitz War. And then if you want to join, you will be able to potentially get some coins if you just do these, these things. And it'll happen for each of the wars that actually appear. So you could potentially get 40 coins per Blitz War per region. So 120 coins per region. So up to potentially like 500 and, what's that, 580? 580 coins if you do this mission on all, I believe, 5 of the beta regions. Whether you think that's worth grinding out, if you're a big fan of war, it potentially could be. Get yourself some coins to boot, find out how the new system works. Kind of win-win for you. So that's the info on War Reforged. Some pretty big changes coming in. Obviously, the amount of defenses you're going to have to use is big. Initially 3, then up to 4 in War of Champions. At least 20 characters on your usable defense teams, then 5 more in your tower, and they all have to be different characters as well. It's going to be pretty rough, but you can potentially use your defense team characters in your attack team, so you could potentially have certain defensive attack teams and stuff. It's not going to be too much of a problem there. Access to the amount of characters that are going to be required is going to be important. We do have a Mythic Store reset coming up in the next couple of weeks, so that's going to make a big impact potentially. Hopefully some of those 90% characters at least are defense team characters, just so a lot of people can get their hands on them, and that could be pretty good. But like I say, I think the biggest change honestly is going to be that live system and how the bonus points work on factions that are actually still got their defenses up. We'll have to see how it plays out. I will be testing out in the beta, like I say. I will be giving my feedback, no doubt, in streams, in content, and I will probably try and arrange a little podcast with some of the content creators just to give our group thoughts, just to get a little bit of a selection of thoughts there. But that's pretty much it for this video, just having a little preview of this update. Do give me your thoughts on this update. Are you going to be testing out in beta? Are you already thinking about the multiple defense teams you're going to have? I think it's definitely a time to start thinking about those multiple defense teams. That is going to be the end of this video, guys. I want to thank you very much for tuning in. And as always, keep on surviving, guys. Keep on surviving.